Welcome to another program in our series, Candidate Forums. We're welcoming a number of candidates for governor, and I've got my co-host, Spano, to join us. I'm Bill Weir, the producer and host, and it's delighted to welcome Tina Liebling today. Tina, you're, I should say, Representative Tina Liebling. You've been elected, haven't you, 7 times to this office. Would you care to tell us about your background?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show today, Bill. And so I represent part of Rochester in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I was first elected in 2004, so I'm in my 7th term now in the Minnesota House. I'm actually the first DFLer to be ever elected to the Minnesota legislature from Olmsted County.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. So when I was elected, I was quite a change. People were quite surprised. And but I first ran in 2002 and didn't get elected. And if you recall, I'm sure you recall, that was the year that we lost Senator Paul Wellstone.
Yes.
But I had a really extraordinary opportunity to run when he was running, and I was very inspired by him and really wanted to model my political career after him. But I'm a lawyer by background. I did criminal defense law. I'm married. I like to tell people I'm married to the same guy for 32 years. We have 3 children. We have 1 new grandchild, 9 months old, and so I have run for office and been elected 7 times and consider myself to be a bold progressive.
And what is a bold progressive?
Well, I've always been really clear with people about the things that I'm for and who I'm for. And so I've always really, I hope, been on the side of ordinary people who need chances to get ahead. And so that's always been very important to me. I'm from a family where I learned early on that who the important people in life are. And my dad used to talk about the ordinary people, the ordinary working people, as the heroes of Minnesota. And used to talk about the big shots and the insiders who kind of sometimes get in the way of letting those ordinary people get ahead in life. And so, I've always been wanting to let everybody have opportunity. I've always been for things like racial justice. I've always been for environmental protection. I've been for single-payer Medicare for all healthcare as long as I can remember. I've been for adequately funding our education system, things like that.
Good. What do you want to ask?
I was going to say, and that is bold these days.
Yeah.
Because we tend to see a lot of kind of fainting around these issues and not doing them. Talk about single payer then, if you wouldn't mind. How's it going to work? And I was particularly interested in your website in the sort of single payer state level.
Well, right. So first of all, we have to recognize that the system we have is working very poorly for a lot of people. I talk to people all the time who, even if they have health insurance, they can't get the care they need. The out-of-pocket costs are going up and up. And so even for people who have insurance through their employer, it's getting to be where they can't access health care when they need it. They have to sit at home and wonder, well, is this serious enough for me to go to the emergency room? Or can I get by with not going because of what it may cost me? This is wrong because we all need health care. And it's not only is it a matter of life and death often to get the health care that we need, this is really a pocketbook issue for Minnesotans. So I think we need to move forward and have a better system where people don't have to go out and buy insurance, or where we don't have an insurance-based system, where we don't have insurance companies between people and the health care that they need. So that it isn't about money. It's got to be about people and their health. And we can do this in a much better way, even in the state. Now, it's because of what's going on in Congress and because we have the president we have, it's a little bit unclear what kind of money resources we're going to have and so on. But it's very clear that we need to move in that direction because the government funds a lot of health care. The state spends a lot of money on health care. And the problem is that of all the money spent on healthcare, a lot of it is wasted in administrative overhead, almost a third of every dollar. We could do a lot better. We could actually buy healthcare instead of a lot of paperwork and paper shuffling.
Right.
So true. Yeah. Are there other reasons that you're running for governor?
So I'm not somebody who's had the grand ambition to be governor before, until recently. But in 2016, after the election, just like a lot of people, I felt like we have to make sure that the world is going the right way and that our state is going the right way. And so I felt the call to sort of step up and do the next thing, just like a lot of people did. We're seeing a lot of activism now from people who, some of whom have never been active before, because they realize we have to be the leaders we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so that's the call that I felt as well, for a couple of reasons. One is that I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders in the 2016 nomination process, and I supported Bernie because I thought he was really speaking about the issues that matter to people in a very clear way. You know, our economy has really not been going so well for lots and lots of people, even though the top numbers look good and the stock market's been doing great. A lot of ordinary folks are just having a harder and harder time making ends meet and seeing any future for themselves. And so if we're not addressing that question and trying to, you know, figure out how are we going to help ordinary people get ahead, I don't know why they would support us. And so if we want to win and we want to lead, we have to be talking to those people. So I was looking for candidates, or a candidate who would have a clear message in the way that Bernie did. Secondly, I've watched for a long time how tough that job is, of the governor's job, and how much pressure the governor is under. It has to be somebody who's got a backbone, who can stand up to pressure, and who can understand how the game is played. Because if we don't, we will just get rolled. So I was looking for that candidate, and like many women, I was looking to other people to be that candidate. And then finally I realized that, just like so many others, if I had to be the leader that I was looking for. So I decided to step forward and run, because I felt that the state needed that kind of leadership, and I believe that I can provide that.
What do you think is your most important thing as a legislator coming into this race?
Well, one of the things, I don't know if you mean in terms of accomplishments in the legislature, or sort of what I bring as having been in the office for a long time. In terms of the second part of that, I have a district that is still 40% Republican. I've been elected 7 times, and I always have to run for re-election, and I'm always dealing with people who don't agree with me. I mean, I am not in a district where I can just, you know, expect everyone to just say, yes, we agree. So I think that part of what I bring is sort of an understanding of that dynamic, that when you're elected to represent everybody, and you've got to be talking to everybody in a way that comes across to people that they understand. So that is something that I think I can bring to this, to the office and to the campaign. In terms of accomplishments, I think I'm known as somebody who's not afraid to take on really tough issues, and sometimes I'm ahead of the pack on those issues, but I take on powerful interests. So for example, I've been working very hard to take on, in our public health programs, we hire HMOs that we pay them to take care of our public patients. And this is a system that's had a lot of problems for a very long time. These are really powerful organizations, and I take them on. And in fact, I was able to make some real reforms, even just a couple of years ago with Republicans in charge. I was actually able to push some reforms through that will save the state many millions of dollars, kind of going up against these powerful organizations.
That's important.
Yeah.
Good for you. So there were 2 facets of that question. What was the other facet?
Well, she did both the accomplishments, I think, and the and the stylistic one. And the stylistic one is really important because, as we've talked earlier, campaigns have changed. The whole game has changed an awful lot, and the sense that what people say is going to be true is not necessarily. Is our capital doing this like Washington? We keep saying, "Oh, there's trouble in Washington," but we're still Minnesota.
Well, we are getting to be a lot more like Washington in some of the dynamics that we see. So we all want to say, let's get along. We can work together, and it's just about different opinions. And sometimes that's true. On a lot of issues, we do work together, and it is just about, people bringing their different perspectives. And that's great if we can, bring people's ideas. And I'm a big believer in bringing all the voices to the table so that you get the best policy. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, the issues aren't really about that. They're about power. So when you're talking about should we fund our schools better or should we give tax cuts to wealthy people, this isn't about just a little policy difference. This is about who's pushing on whom. And you have to be able to stand up and fight for what you believe is right for people and stand up sometimes to those very big forces and hold your ground. And so that's something that is indeed one of the reasons I'm running, because I think it takes a great deal of backbone and an understanding of what the dynamics are to be able to move forward under those circumstances.
Talk about some other issues that you're hearing about out there.
Yes. Well, as I said before, I think the economy is still an enormous issue. I hear from a lot of people, especially younger people, people in their 20s, who just feel like they can't get ahead. They've got huge student debt, or they, say to people, you can get a job. The unemployment is really low. Well, yeah, they can get a job or two or three to try to make ends meet, because a lot of the jobs don't pay very well and don't have benefits. So I hear from young people all the time about how desperate they feel, and I've even had young people say to me, I can't start a family because I can't afford it. And this really pains me, because my generation had a different kind of opportunity. Right. But it goes throughout our economy, people that are just working harder and harder and are really feeling desperate. So I think that what we need is to have state government really be there to focus on the needs of ordinary people, not the people who can afford to have bunches of lobbyists at the Capitol or lawyers representing them, but the people that are working so hard that they don't have time to pay attention to what's going on at the Minnesota Capitol. Those are the people we should be thinking about with every single thing we do. So, for example, we talk about wages. Over a recent 40-year period, the productivity of Americans went up 72%. The average wage went up only 9%.
Wow, big difference.
Big difference. And CEO compensation went up 950%.
Ooh.
Right. So, what's going on? Well, a lot of the resources in the economy are being sucked out by a very few people. So one of the things we need to do is raise the minimum wage, right? When we talk about raising the wage, sometimes people say, well, we should have $15 an hour. And there's some plans out there, $15 an hour over 5 years. Well, if we're going to say to people, we're going to fight for you, I think we need to be recognizing that right now, $15 an hour in many places in the state does not even get you a basic needs budget. This is where we've gotten to. There's a report out that you can look up online, Minnesota Cost of Living Report, and it tells you how much you need to earn per hour to have just a bare bones adequate budget. And in many places in the metro area, it's well above $15 an hour. So if we're going to fight for people, we can't be saying to them, yeah, $15 an hour in 5 years. We got to be saying, we recognize that you're not able to make it. You're working hard and you're not seeing the fruits of your labor. So that's the kind of discussion we need to have. What do we need to do to help people's money go farther and to raise those wages? So raising the minimum wage is one thing, strengthening labor rights, the erosion of unions is a big piece of this, that people just have less and less power to demand higher wages. And that's a real problem because unemployment is pretty low, but wages aren't going up as they should. And we really need to focus on that.
Well, it sounds like you're not one to be bullied or intimidated. And I've heard you've said that about yourself. Why? What makes you so strong to stand up to those bullies?
Well, that's a really good question.
Your upbringing?
Well, I did study karate for a long time.
Oh, good.
That probably helped, But and by background, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, so
that's good.
I think I was partly attracted to that because I wanted to stand up for people, and when you're defending somebody, you have to be the person who stands up and says something when there's something wrong, right? So I don't know which came first, really, but it is just something that I've always done. And I think people at the legislature who know me really do know that about me, that if I think something's wrong, I'm going to say something about it. And I'm sure sometimes people wish I wouldn't, but, but I do. That's just who I am. And, I just have to speak up for what I think is right.
Good for you. And are there some other issues? You've been offering a constitutional amendment on legalizing cannabis?
Right, so legalizing cannabis, or removing the prohibition, as I like to say, is one of the issues that I've been talking about. It's not the top level issue in the campaign, but I put forward a bill on this in the last legislative session. I hope to try to move it forward in this next session, because I think this is something that really we should be doing for a whole lot of reasons. The way my bill is structured is it's a lot of policy that I've worked on over a long period of time and done a lot of research and put my ideas into a bill. But ultimately, it would be a constitutional amendment that the people of Minnesota would have a chance to vote on. Because I think it is that important, and I think that it is something that really we should put in the Constitution. I mean, our Constitution is not like the federal. It has plenty of, issues in it. And I do think this is an important one, and it's important for people to weigh in. In our state, of course, we don't have an initiative and referendum process where people get to vote on these kinds of issues unless it's for a constitutional amendment. But there are huge racial justice reasons why we should do that. I think there's a personal liberty issue here that, we certainly, people are allowed to buy alcohol, adults are allowed to buy alcohol, and alcohol, in fact, is a terribly destructive drug and causes a lot of harm in society. But our country did experiment with prohibition, and it didn't go so well. So we removed that prohibition. I think the prohibition on cannabis for personal use is causing a lot of harm. And that's why
it's taking a lot of men out of families.
It's taking men out of families. It's making criminals out of ordinary people who, want to use cannabis for whatever reason, because it calms them down, because it helps their PTSD, or for a lot of where they just enjoy it. And right now, the only way they can buy it is on the black market by going to criminals, where they don't know what they're getting. They don't know the strength of it. They don't know if it's contaminated or not. And they're having to be in this connection with people who may, in fact, want to sell them something else, too. So there are lots of reasons why we should do what 8 states are already doing and allow people to have the personal freedom to buy cannabis legally if they choose to.
It's not enough to have medical marijuana?
Well, that was a good start. Our medical cannabis program is very restrictive. And what people tell me, I haven't used it myself, but people tell me that the medications are extremely expensive. And in fact, you can't smoke it. You can only buy it in oil and pill form. So it is very expensive. A lot of people are having trouble getting the authorization from a physician that they may need. Not that many physicians are involved in giving people, it's not really an authorization. They have to certify that they have a certain kind of condition that would
Mm-hmm.
is on the list and so on. So it's a good start, but it's not the same as allowing people the personal freedom to be able to use cannabis if responsibly, if they so choose. And I think that's a direction we should go.
I've run into a few people lately who talk about legalizing cannabis, but because of the dollars, Colorado essentially,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's kind of goes back to your style that that's not the issue you want to talk about. But talk about it now.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Thank you for recognizing that. Right, I mean, I know there's a lot of money in this too, but my reasons for wanting to
Yeah.
remove the prohibition are not about the money, but indeed, states are bringing in a lot of funding. In my bill, I direct that money toward educating people about drugs and treatment. But this is a bill that would go through the legislature. There needs to be a lot more discussion about how the proceeds would be used. Some states are using it for education. But in addition to making money, we would be saving a lot of law enforcement resources by not criminalizing people who want to use this. So there is indeed a lot of money to be had from
There's
this.
a lot of waste of law enforcement resources on
Yes.
trying to enforce that law.
Right, I certainly think so, and a lot of lives ruined.
Yes,
Because
more important.
these days, if you have any kind of criminal offense on your record, even if you get it expunged, which is possible in some instances, everybody can still find it because of the internet. And it's very hard to get away from, and people are tagged with things they did when they were young.
So they can't even
Yeah.
rent an apartment
That's right, sometimes that's the case. I mean,
or
it
get
can-
a job?
or get a job. It can absolutely ruin somebody's life. And when we were kids, that wasn't the case. You could make a mistake and kind of live it down, and you just can't do that anymore.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we've got about 6 minutes left. Have we covered the biggest issues for Minnesotans?
Well, I certainly think that economic question and the healthcare questions are some of the biggest issues.
Yes.
There are some others that I think are very important, and they've been touched on a little bit. One is racial justice and inequity. This is a really important question for Minnesota. What are we going to do about this? Because on so many measures, we are way at the bottom. For all the great things about our state, we have tremendous, what people would call opportunity gaps, and they show up in all kinds of ways. And frankly, we can't afford that anymore, and if we ever could. So this is something that we as a state really have to figure out. There's no simple solution to it. One of the proposals that I have, though, is to have 2 years tuition free at Minnesota's colleges and university.
Oh, that
Yeah.
might be a great help to people to get jobs.
Well, I think it would. I think it would be a huge boost to our economy in this state. And not only that, it would help to close some of these gaps to a degree. We need a lot more than this. But too often now, because college or technical school, by the way, not everybody wants to go to college, but high school isn't enough anymore. And yet, young people are priced out of a higher education in way too many cases. And so if you come from a low-income family, yeah, there are some scholarships and things available. But we really need to make sure that every student in the state can get the education that they need. And I think that would go a ways toward closing some of the gaps that we see. Absolutely. But this racial issue is huge for Minnesota, and we've just got to find solutions to it. Another one is there's some pretty big environmental issues out there. Climate change, and especially this, young people are, they are up in arms about climate change, and they should be, because it's an emergency now. And we've got to move as quickly as we can to a green economy, to a non-polluting economy. And we've got to realize that if we don't spend actually it's pretty economically beneficial to do that. But whatever resources it would take, if we don't spend them now, we're going to be spending them later. And we're seeing that in our whole country with all of these natural disasters. And trying to clean up afterwards is a lot more difficult than taking preventive measures.
Big expense.
Big expense.
Bill is always on the high plane. I wanted to get down to the dirty old politics
Okay.
Oh,
and talk about the process now. It's, as you said, a two-tiered process. DFL candidates are seeking the DFL endorsement, and then you have to seek the voters' endorsement. Talk about
Correct.
that.
So the DFL endorsement, so there is right now 6 candidates vying for the DFL endorsement. The first real step in the process is February 6th, when we have precinct caucuses all over the state. There will be a gubernatorial preference poll, non-binding, that evening that people can participate in, but also that's the first step of selecting delegates to go to the next levels. And ultimately, the candidate for the party will be selected at the state convention, which will be in Rochester in June. But I highly encourage people to go and attend their precinct caucuses so they have a voice. Otherwise, we get down to the end of the process, and then you've got, one Democrat and one Republican.
yeah, help select the governor you want.
That's right. This is the time, since we don't have instant runoff voting, or we've got, this is the process that we've got.
Well, we've got 2 minutes left.
And given the process that we've got, how much, there have been articles and rumors about the amount of money going to come in on the governor race in Minnesota, because with that, Republicans can control all, assuming they keep control of the House and the Senate. And they can then make us into Wisconsin, kind of.
Right.
So,
Yes, yeah, well, that is the big concern among Democrats, of course. There's a lot at stake. And we see that with Trump in the White House and with the Republican Congress, that Minnesota really needs to be kind of a buffer for Minnesotans. And it's really important to keep DFL leadership if we're going to be the kind of place that we are. Otherwise, life here could change drastically. So there's
We don't want
absolutely
that.
no, right, we don't want that. We need to go in a positive direction.
Yeah.
And help to empower people and make life better for people, not give in to this, let the attack on working people continue as it has in other states.
well, a sort of a trick question. What's the story? What's the, when I'm doing my elevator speech, what
We
should I
have
say?
less than 40 seconds left.
What should I say about Tina Liebling? What?
So I'm a person who is a bold progressive. I'm really clear about what I'm for and who I'm for, and I can't be intimidated or bullied. I stand up for what I believe is right, and I am who I say I am. I think that's really important, that we have to be who we say we are, and people have to understand that we care about them. I think that's how we win, and that's how we should govern.
Well, thank you, Y, for co-hosting, and thank you, Tina, for telling us how you will be governor.
Thank you very much for having me.